Schools community. Welcome to our latest family virtual town hall where we discuss our reopening efforts as well as what we're doing to educate students safely and to get our staff to a place where they can continue to support students well. I'm here with our esteemed Chief Academic Officer / Chief of Schools, John Davis. Chief Davis, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Andre. You're the only one that ever says esteemed, but I'll take it.
Well, without you, we definitely couldn't get this done. So we're glad that you're here. Everyone, for those of you who are new to our events, what we do is we start out with a brief presentation, some updates, and some things that you may not have known, and then we proceed to a Q&A. For the last couple of events, we haven't had nearly as the length of a Q&A as some of you wanted, but I can promise you tonight we will be here to try to answer your questions the best we can. There's still a lot of things in flux. There's still a lot that we're learning, but at the same time, we're going to do our best to provide information to help you understand where your district is today and where we're going. If you have a question, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, please submit your question in the comment section. When we open up the Q&A, that will make it up to me, and we will answer as many questions as we can before 6:45 or so. If we cannot answer your question, you do have options. You can send us an email to reopening@bcps.k12.md.us, or you can just leave it in the comment section and we'll do our best to answer it with our great group of experts who you cannot see on the screen, but I can assure you that they're here. So with that said, Chief Davis, I understand you got some updates to share.
Yeah, I have some updates to share. Thank you again, Andre. I know a lot of people will probably have questions about our presentation at Tuesday's board meeting, but I do want to say right now I'm at Fort Worthington Elementary Middle School. Fort Worthington is housing one of our summer school programs, and I had the opportunity for the last couple of hours to talk with some teachers to kind of mimic what students go through, right? Making sure everyone has their masks on, and kind of really tried to figure out what our teachers have gone through in this summer program, kind of hear what their experiences have been, what they've seen from students as they've came in. So I know we're going to talk mostly about virtual, but I did want to say that I'm here at Fort Worthington. It's wonderful to be here. As always, our teachers show up in incredible ways, and a few of them have shown up here in the summer to do some in-person work with students, and it was great to see, and it was great to hear from them. With that, though, you're right, Andre. There are a decent amount of updates. Of course, from Tuesday's board presentation, I think most people know we're starting virtual. We are absolutely starting virtual, and we'll start on September 8th. At the same time, our push will be to come back to some type of hybrid situation where students can come inside the building, right? I mean, that is one of the pieces of feedback, is that students have loved coming back into the building, and they've loved being engaged and learning like we always know our young people do. And, you know, we've done it in very small groups here at Fort Worthington and made it incredibly safe. And so that is the goal, but we're going to start virtual. That's what we've been talking about since the board meeting. That's what I assume a lot of the questions are going to be about. And that's fine, right? And where we know, where I know the answers, we're going to talk right through it. And I'm just going to be very honest that, again, as a leader, some of the details we're still working out. And if I have to explain that, I will explain that. Because it doesn't matter if I'm speaking to our staff, it doesn't matter if I'm speaking to our parents. I'm always going to be as transparent as possible and let you all know exactly where we're at. We're excited to start virtual. We're gonna do so much good work in the virtual space. It's of course not going to be the same as the traditional space. It will be different, but given that we're in a worldwide pandemic, we're going to knock out being in the virtual space. I'll speak just a little bit about it again, a little bit more about that before we get into the announcements, right? I think from Tuesday's board meeting, right, one of the main things that I feel like we get feedback on is just the amount of screen time that we're going to be asking of young people, right? And I think from pre-K, it started at about 110 minutes. It ramps up to about 160 at the kindergarten. Grades 1 through 5 is 230. And then when you get into the adolescents, the middle school and the high school, it gets to about 300, a little bit more than 300. We think that's appropriate. We believe that in the end, we want students to get as many opportunities as possible to continue their learning. And you can't do that in 10 or 15 minute spurts with middle school students, right? They're going to have to engage for a longer period of time. And we think that they can do that. At the same time, we're always going to be watching and seeing how this goes in September, right? All of us across the nation are doing this really for the first time. We did some great work in the spring, but it's going to be more for real. I know that the families out there are going to expect more on September 8th, and we're going to deliver that. And we're going to deliver it first with a good amount of instruction during those times, and we're going to see how we all react to that. I think it's a really good plan. It is still a draft plan, right? There's still time if there's feedback that they should be giving to us. Because we don't have to turn in a plan until I think it's mid-August to the Maryland State Department of Education. Let me get to some of the notes and some of the updates, right? Again, we have changed the school calendar that was approved at the board by the Board of School Commissioners on August 26th. That's when our staff will return back. And we pushed back the start of school for students 1 week to September 8th. Again, September 8th is the very first day of virtual learning. When we made those changes, we then had to push the last day back by just 1 day. So the last day is changed to June 15th. Let me hit those three one more time. August 26th is when staff return, and they'll have 8 days of professional development. And that time we are taking so near and dear because we're going to make sure everyone's ready for the first day with students virtually, and that's September 8th. And then the last day is set for June 15th. Another thing is, if any of our people in the audience saw the presentation, I talked a little bit about a reopening data dashboard that we're going to use, and we've got that up and running, right? And that's at www.baltimorecitysschools.org/reopening, and you can review that dashboard any time of the day or night. Again, we've got a reopening data dashboard, baltimorecitysschools.org/reopening. The next one is another quick update, right? Our fourth quarter report cards. We want to make sure that you understand where we are with that. The first fourth quarter report cards were mailed last Thursday, July 23rd, but not every student and grade level received them. So you should be receiving them here in the upcoming week. I would also tell you that if you haven't gotten on the parent portal, that's another thing that you should sign up for. We apologize that this is taking a while to resolve and get those out to you, but we are on it so that everyone gets their fourth quarter report card. And probably the biggest announcement is around device distribution, right? We're going to kind of change our device distribution from having it happen at North Avenue to go back to how we did it in the spring and work that out on the at schools individually, right? Our goal is to provide all students with devices that they need to participate in virtual learning so that on September 8th, everyone is ready. So starting next week, City Schools, we will change how students and families will get their devices and Wi-Fi hotspots. Those items will not be available at North Avenue anymore. So starting next week, you can't get them at North Avenue. And the plan is to begin distributing devices and hotspots at schools in a few weeks. We're going to share the specifics no later than Monday, August 17th. So there'll be a couple of weeks where we're not distributing them, and then we will give all the details, hopefully before Monday, August 17th, but that will be at the very latest. You'll get the information via robocalls, emails, Facebook, Twitter, all the normal ways. And I'm sure when we do these types of town halls, we'll make all of those details known as well. Again, it won't be available until that announcement on August 17th. The large increase in the volume of families coming to North Avenue has really made it difficult to meet the current social distancing guidelines. And also because it's hot outside and to have those sufficient climate controlled space for families and students. I just want to be honest about that. We got way more people than we thought were going to show up. And because of social distancing issues, because it's incredibly hot right now, we're going to have to make that change. And we want to provide these important items at school and then be able to reduce those large crowds and in the end serve you better so that we're ready for September 8th. So again, right, we'll share those specifics on Monday, August 17th, and starting next week, they will not be available at North Avenue anymore. So again, I wanted to give those quick updates. I'm sure there'll probably be some questions about the presentation on Tuesday, and we might as well just get into it, Andre.
All right. Thank you, Chief Davis. Yes, we've got folks that have been waiting on us, and we want to work to answer their questions. But before we do, there are a couple things I did not do at the beginning that I need to do now. There's somebody on this who's watching tonight who may be wondering, where's the CEO? We saw her on Tuesday. We don't see her today. Well, Dr. Sonia Brookins Santelisa sends her greetings. She's on vacation, but I can assure you she's here in spirit. And she's also very invested in making sure that we share great information with you. So while she's not here, again, she is here in spirit. And also, I want to welcome our folks that are watching via Zoom through our partner, ASCI Translations, our Spanish-speaking audience. We look forward to hearing from them as well this evening. So if you got questions, whether you speak English or Spanish, we're here to try to answer those questions. Speaking of, Chief Davis, let's get to it. And we're going to start out with Twitter, at Loving the Girls. This person asked, why are y'all talking about reopening? What about the kids with asthma and family members? So I guess, Chief Davis, the question is, why are we reopening?
For first, we are reopening in the virtual space because we're going to make this as safe as possible. And, there's been an uptick in cases across the nation, also in Baltimore City and in Maryland. So we're going to start virtual so that those situations that I think the writer kind of points out rightly, we're going to make sure that those aren't issues as we start off. But we just got to be real honest, right? Kids need school, right? They need their peers next to them. They need kind of the normal social aspect of schools. They need to engage with their teacher. They need that face-to-face. I think that's one of the things that I keep hearing from teachers is that kids have loved coming to summer school because they can get back into a consistent structure and not be in the house all the time, right? And so we are going to keep pushing for that. But even when we push for that, we're going to end up making sure that we've got different options so that in the case where that the writer talked about, if you've got people at your house that have got asthma or they're in a high risk situation and it doesn't make sense to come back in a hybrid case, then we're going to make some type of virtual situation available, right? And we're working through different options and thinking through that. That's why we even gave us more time before we make any type of hybrid announcement until the middle of October. And then even at that time, we don't know what the virus is going to be. So we're taking it literally day by day, week by week as we make these decisions, because the question that was brought up about family members is 100% right. It's not just safety for our students and our staff, it's safety for family members as well, because we all end up have the unfortunate ability to pass on the virus if we're not safe in school, if we're not safe when we go home. So that's a great question, and it really goes to show that we're starting in the best way possible virtual, but we cannot get away from the fact that it is the face-to-face instruction and the normal consistency that's best for students, and eventually we're going to get there.
Thank you, Chief Davis. Now, returning to Facebook, Heather Basford asked, can you talk a little bit about what is the proper amount of time that a student should spend in front of a screen? It sounds like she may be concerned that students may be spending too much time.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of defining point that I'll be honest with you that kept me up for the last 4 or 5 weeks as we made this type of decision, right? It really is kind of age dependent, because we know our youngest learners cannot spend as much time engaged in front of a screen and keep their attention. That's why we started with just things like 110 minutes for pre-K students and 160 for kindergarten students, right? And even ramping up to about 5 hours for our high school students, we have to see how that's going to go down. I'm going to talk as real as possible with this, right? it's very hard to meet the needs of everyone, and people have different opinions about the right amount of time on a screen. But we got to be honest that there's a heck of a lot of kids that have been spending the most of the summer on a screen. It may not have been in front of a teacher, but they've been spending time in front of a screen. I mean, I'll speak honestly. I make my fourth grader do math and have her read every day, but she wants to get on that screen, and frankly, she can do 4 hours. I know that she can, right? And I know there's a lot of kids that spend way more than 4 hours. It's probably not the right 4 hours. I'd rather them be in front of teachers. And as a father, I would rather believe that. So I believe that as a leader as well. So I think that our students can take that amount of time. We've looked at different pieces of research. I don't think there's been this level of research because there really hasn't been this type of situation that the nation has had to face, and there's not a huge body of it. But we've tried to read as many things as possible. We've gotten consultants that have worked in that kind of digital space and really tried to figure that out. And so we know that the times we put down are really what we think is right, but we're going to see how it goes in September. And it's not just that, right? It's the work that students do after school. It's always that type of thing, right? It's not just the screen time. It's the assignments that they do that we call asynchronously, that's not with the teacher. So we tried to put all of that together when we figured out what is the best schedule. And in the end, giving students a well-rounded education. So it's not just about reading and math. We want them to hear about social studies and science so that learning loss is minimized as much as possible. Those were difficult decisions. I don't want to lie about that. But we do believe it's the right way to start. I'll say one more thing about this, Andre. I've seen different districts who put out like a blanket amount of time for students to be online. And I don't quite understand that because I think it changes greatly based on kind of the age of students. So I don't know, as people look across districts, sometimes you'll see a certain amount of time. And I just think that it bears just the honest observation that our youngest students can only spend so much. And as we get older, we think that like the 4 or 5 hours is a good sweet spot for our older students.
Thank you, Chief Davis. And the questions are rolling in. A pretty good clip. Back on Facebook, we have Sean Selassie. He's got more than a few questions at one setting, but we'll only pick a few for this moment. And we'll start with one about workload. How will you adjust the workload as not to overwhelm students and their families? This is stressful for all. The workload need not exasperate it.
Yes, I think the one, again, that I am most worried about are our youngest students, right? Because surely at first, and maybe throughout the entire year, right, a parent is probably going to have to be nearby. We're working very hard to figure out the right way to record all of our lessons. And to do it in the right legal way so that if a parent can't get online with their pre-K student at the right time, that they can do it later on in the day. So we're trying to give that flexibility because we know, yes, that workload and that workload, frankly, on the adults, especially with the younger kids, is a big deal. So we're going to try to be as flexible as possible with that. I think workload. Beyond that, though, I mean, we should be real honest, right? A normal work day or a normal school day is about 7 hours. And I think we're asking students at max to be online for a little bit more than 5. And so from just a straight workload standpoint, I think we're being considerate with it. Sure, there'll be work to do outside of the face-to-face work with the teacher, but I think the workload is going to be doable, right? I think it's really the interaction with the teacher that we've got to be really strong on and much better than in the spring. And then, if the workload is too much, then we've got to hear that as well. But I think we've tried to set it up so that teachers also have times called office hours where they can talk with students and students can interact with them. So if they had a lesson and they didn't get it, right, there's a time where they can call in and get help. We were told by our teachers that that was very helpful, especially on the secondary level. We want to make sure that continues. So I think flexibility, Always trying to listen to what happens as this proceeds, but also just being honest that the day for students is a lot less than it was in the normal brick and mortar. And so I think the workload is going to be appropriate.
Thanks, Chief Davis. We're going to stay on Facebook. It appears to be the most frequently used platform as far as our questions this evening. Misha Osborne asked, how far in advance should a school receive notice that a hybrid experience will not work for a high-risk student? So I think what we're seeing is how far will we let folks know that we'll be going hybrid or we'll be offering a hybrid option, and how do we anticipate that they will be able to let us know that they don't want it?
Yes, we will take into complete consideration. If we get to the point where we think we are going hybrid, there will be a number of weeks where folks can let us know what their situation is, right? This is not going to be like a weekend thing, please. To make some type of change like that, we'll be given, I don't want to say for sure how many weeks. I would say it's got to be 3 or 4 weeks to make that type of change, right? Obviously, we're starting virtual. And so, we don't even have a date when, like, we're going to give a date when we give you an update, which I think is October 16th. And so, we're not even committing to going to hybrid at that point. We know that's what's best for students. But in the end, we don't know if we're going to be ready at that point. We don't know if how the virus will dictate that. But whenever we do make that decision, it will be a few weeks before we make it, right? Teachers are going to have to get ready in their classroom. And then families are going to have to get ready, and the caller or the writer is exactly right, and that we're going to have to give families time to let us know what their situation is, right? I can't believe it would be more than a month, and I have to believe it would be at least 2 weeks. So I think sometime in that sweet spot is how much time we'd give folks.
Thank you, Chief Davis. And apparently I spurred some more questions from other platforms. Back over on YouTube, Melissa Schober asked, how does the district anticipate meeting the needs of older students who may have children, be caring for siblings, or working to support their families? This is a variation of the question we received last week from our students themselves. What if our students have other responsibilities that,
Yeah, I would say a number of things. I mean, our home and hospital folks work incredibly well with any pregnant or parenting students. And so we will continue to lean on them. I think they've always done a great job in helping students that are either sick or have an unfortunate or have a situation where they need additional support. And we'll still knock that out. That's a really strong team in Baltimore City Public Schools. But again, I think what is always very near and dear to me is the flexibility that we have to have. And so beyond a home and hospital team that helps students that are parenting or that helps students that are sick, we'll make sure that students can access the lessons and the videos and do the work in an asynchronous way if they have to work, if there's a reason that they have to miss the class, right? I mean, we know adolescents, so let's talk real again. Sometimes they're missing the class because they're sleeping in or they're getting up late or whatever it is. So I'd rather them have the face-to-face, let's be real. But let's also be real that there are students that have responsibilities. I think Melissa writing talks about a couple of those responsibilities that are huge. We have to make it flexible. We have to have the lesson recorded, and we have to allow students to get online at a different time and some way or another show that they've done the work so that they can be counted as present, and not just be present, but do the work and gain some understanding. That's not ideal. I'd rather them have that interaction with their teacher. But we have to make that available because Melissa's exactly right. There's just going to be times, and there's going to be older students that we know that have different responsibilities that we have to really account for and make sure that they have every opportunity to earn their credits and eventually graduate, right? Even though this is a tough situation for everyone, as a school system, we have to make that available, and we will.
Thanks, Chief Davis. Yeah, that again was a question that really got to the matter of what a lot of our students were concerned about last week. The students who had joined us for this conversation, and will join us again next week for a student-led roundup, which we'll be publicizing very, very soon. Now, Chief Davis, we're back to Facebook from Aisha Gladden. She asked, what options will we have to provide our child with our own curriculum, but keep them connected to the school if we feel like the school is not providing a satisfactory online education? So if I want to homeschool because I don't feel like this is working for my student, what might some of my options be?
Yeah, I am not the expert at homeschooling, but I know that there's a way to sign up for homeschool and do that. My memory is it's through the state, but I might be wrong about that. So we might have to get someone on there to answer the question better than I'm remembering it. But that is a decision,
We do,
right?
we actually do have somebody there. Sarah Warren, can you come to the floor, please?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for that question. So, families that want to sign up for sign up for homeschooling need to apply through our home and hospital office. It is a process that requires some degree of oversight and reviews throughout the course of the year. So it is all mandated by the state, but it's run through our home and hospital office, and we can provide more information if people want to pursue that.
And thank you, Sarah. Let me jump in on that as well. So that's the technical part of it. The real part is, as a leader in Baltimore City and as someone who taught in Baltimore City, I want that parent to stay. I want our virtual learning to be strong enough that we have parents that are like, yeah, this is what's best for my child at this time. I realize every single parent, myself included, have got to make the choices we've got to make for our children. That's just first and foremost as parents. And I'm one of them, so I get it. But the truth is, I want us to deliver for every family. I don't want families to have to make that decision. We're working incredibly hard, and our teachers are dedicated to the point that we're going to make sure that online learning is as best as it possibly can be. And of course, it looks different for the younger ones than the older elementary students and the middle school, the high school. But we've got different curricula associated with that. We've got different things that can happen online. There's personalized learning to meet the needs of students where they sit. And we know that it has to be better than the spring. I'm bound and determined to lead our folks through that. And I know that the work behind the scenes is eventually going to be fruitful starting September 8th. So it's a great question. And if that ends up being the option that some parents want to take, completely understand it, and we'll make sure that's available. I just need people to know that it's in my heart and in my mind that we've got to get to the point where parents choose us because they know that's what's best.
Well said, Chief Davis. We feel like we can get it done. We encourage you to give us a try. Moving forward, Chief Davis, now we are back to YouTube with a frequently asked question regarding young students. Thanks to Thomas Flores, he asked, what if kids that are in small grades like pre-K through 12 move their mask or something because little kids won't be able to stay in place with their mask on all day? So when the hybrid option is offered, how are we going to help kids keep their mask on?
So I think I'm going to start speaking honestly from what I'm hearing from teachers about this, right? What I'm hearing is, sure, the mask sometimes goes down. And let me just, again, kind of speak the truth, right? I feel like I can put my mask on, and sometimes every now and then it goes down for me, right? And here in our summer school situations, people have just been very vigilant to be like, hey, move the mask up, right? But I don't want people walking around thinking that kids are just like throwing off their mask and they can't wear it. No. They're following the directions, right? We've got K through 2 grade bands, and sure, they have to be taught about it. Sure, there are times when there might be a room that we take a child in who needs to take a break, for instance, and maybe take the mask off. right? If we can see, teachers are great at seeing this with students and knowing that maybe a break is available and we've got to maybe take students outside or something. So sometimes that happens, but I want to dispel this myth that like students can't keep their mask on, because I feel like that's 100% wrong. Sure, there's going to be times like when the mask drops or something and we got to work through it. Like this is life. But what we've seen so far is that students, for the most part, follow that. They know the seriousness of it. We have to remind them. And I think the little ones, what I've heard is that like teaching them the 6 feet is probably just as important as the mask situation. And so it's about teaching students the right behaviors, and they're going to follow us, right? And when they don't, we'll have those conversations and we'll do whatever we need to do. But I don't want people to be worried about that, because I think what I'm actually more worried about are the adults, right? As adults, we're used to like talking with folks and getting, being in meetings and being closer than 6 feet. And, sometimes you've got grade level teams that are just used to meeting. And so you meet a lot and then maybe you're not showing 6 feet. I actually think it's the adults that we have to work through as much, if not more so, than the students. And I've heard that in different forms, and I think that's probably the case, right? And so all of us have got to be leaders in this. All of us have just got to speak the truth, keep ourselves accountable, right? We were talking about the fact that maybe at schools, eventually when we go back and we've got to have masks on, but there's a designated person that like literally is checking on folks around keeping your mask on and keeping it above the nose. It sounds simple, but some people get offended when you tell them this. And even in schools, people might take it personally. No. Like this is how we're going to live in a school eventually. And we're going to make sure that it's not just about, 6 feet, but that we are interacting the right way, even to the point of having someone that checks on this throughout the day. And I think, this is what we've learned from summer school. This is what we've learned because we've already brought kids in and kind of seen what's gone down, right? And again, I don't know, right? People can say what they want to say, but like the fact that we have teachers that wanted to do it and the fact that we were doing this at a number of schools, we've gained a lot of insight. So yes, of course, something's going to happen from time to time, but I'll tell you, students love being back to school. And to be very honest about it, right, I feel like it's all of us that have to worry about this, not just students. And I feel like the adults have to worry about it as well. But students will follow those directions, right? I mean, right now I'm 6 feet away from the next desk and there's the little dividers so that like even that is kind of quarantined off a little bit. And I think we're going to end up being in a good space whenever we go back.
Thanks, Chief Davis. Now, for this next question, we have Michael Radding here, our Director of IT Support Services, to support Chief Davis in answering this question from Amy Ferriante on Facebook. She asked, will you have those Wi-Fi buses? I've heard other cities are doing this. So, Michael and Chief Davis, will we have Wi-Fi buses?
So I can respond to that, Chief Davis. One of the things that we've seen with school districts that have implemented Wi-Fi on buses, oftentimes those districts have a full fleet of buses that they use. As you may know, city schools relies on the MTA. Even though we do provide yellow bus transportation, we don't have the size of fleets that a lot of school districts that transport students exclusively through yellow buses have. In addition to that, we do have we're thinking about this from the perspective of scalability and our ability to find solutions that reach the most families. And so we've taken this multi-tiered approach to providing internet connectivity to families. We've been talking about Comcast Internet Essentials, a program that's been available to families that we've been advertising very heavily since March. In addition, we have been providing hotspots to families that need them. And so the district office distributions have featured hotspots as part of a solution for families. We have also been investigating other solutions, such as the mesh network proof of concept, which we piloted at a few schools just to see if it's a solution that can go to scale and reach into communities. So these are the ways we're trying to reach families. Even though Wi-Fi on buses isn't one of the solutions we're taking, we do have these other approaches to address that. In addition to that, one of the challenges with Wi-Fi and buses in urban districts is oftentimes you need a line of sight to be able to have connectivity. And just looking at our city and our landscape, oftentimes looking at neighborhoods, they don't have that line of sight that you see much more so featured in rural communities where you often see Wi-Fi being used on buses.
Thank you, Michael. Chief Davis, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Michael hit that out. I mean, I think we're always going to look to be innovative. And I think when people hear things like Wi-Fi buses, right, I want people to know that and more we're trying to consider. Some things we're probably not able to do. And Michael gave the right frame and the right understanding of what we're up against with that. I just want people to know that all of those types of questions and thoughts are appreciated because we need to turn over every single rock so that we can do what's best for our young people.
All right, thank you, Michael. And Chief Davis, we've got a question about special education. And to help you answer it is Dr. Deborah Brooks, our Executive Director of Special Education, who will come to the floor. Chief Davis, we are being asked, what about special needs teachers? Their jobs are already difficult. So presumably, what does either virtual learning or hybrid learning mean for our special education teachers?
Deborah, I'll start and then you can jump in if that's okay. I think for our special education teachers, you're right. Our special education teachers are so very important as they work with students that have individualized plans. To some degree, right, I think that they're going to do a lot of the same things that they did in the brick and mortar world, where they would team up and be inside classrooms and work with students as a second teacher or as pushing into the classroom to help students out. They've got to form those same types of relationships with the students that a general education teacher does, but also form that relationship with their kind of co-teacher. It's the co-teaching model that I feel like we've got to lean on some. And so in the virtual space where they can check on students specifically to make sure that they are on track, to make sure that they're absorbing the lesson like anyone else. And then at times pulling them out into small groups, right? We're going to, if people have seen the schedule for different grade levels, there's always this small group time. And that's a great time for a special educator to help out with small groups and make sure students are getting what they need. So yes, they're incredibly important. And I think, right, they also know their students best. And so they can do kind of different things in the office hours time, in different small groups where they can work with the families to pull them out in a virtual space. So I think there's a lot of options for our special educators, and we're going to need them to throw in just like all the other teachers do. All of our teachers, again, I know I say it a lot, but I just want to praise them for how much they've leaned into this space. And our special educators have done that and will need to continue to do that as they work in the virtual environment with the regular educator. Dr. Brooks, do you have additional thoughts about that?
So thank you. And John, you're absolutely correct. The special educator will continue to provide those additional supports to the student who has a disability, both in the virtual space as well as hybrid, both in the general ed classroom and in those pull-out sessions. We also have targeted professional learning opportunities for our special educator around the online platforms, the accessibility tools to be able to support that special educator as they're providing that direct instruction and support for our special education students, and also for our paraprofessionals, as they are also going to support the special educators as well as the students with disabilities, so that we are meeting both the students' needs as well as supporting the special educator. I too am a special educator, so I understand how important it is for the special educator to be able to have those additional supports as they case manage the student, progress monitor the student, as well as work very closely in that collaborative space with the general educator, and also provide supports for our families of the students with disabilities. So we will be working, providing additional supports to support the special educator in both that virtual space as well as that hybrid space, but also providing an opportunity for them to get additional professional learning opportunities as well.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. And as always, thanks, Chief Davis. That's another one of those topics that we get asked repeatedly. What does this mean for our special education students, teachers, and families? And I'm glad we can answer it. Moving forward to a question from Stephanie McKenzie. Stephanie asked, will student assessments be given at the beginning of the year so that students will have a relevant idea of where their students are at the start of the year?
I mean, the short answer is yes. We're working through what the right timing of that is, but we are going to give some beginning of the year assessments that can be done virtually, frankly, so that we can figure out, right, where the learning loss has occurred and then adjust accordingly. I mean, we use the word data all the time in education. What it really means is where's a student succeeding at and where do they need help? And we've got to give those assessments so that our teachers can understand that. And then when they're in small groups, right, I talked about small groups just a little bit, and I want families to understand that. And then when they go into small groups, right, they're working on some of the skills or some of the standards, some of the learning standards where they maybe lost some learning or maybe where they've got to catch up some. And so, yes, we'll have some at the beginning of the year around ELA and math. Some other big ones, if there are families out there of pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, third graders, right? The early reading indicators, the early tests that sometimes are called Amplify or Dibbles, those are really, really important. And right, it is those students that I think we will even consider bringing back first, right, when we eventually come to a hybrid situation, because our early learners have got to learn to read, right? That timeline up through the second, maybe the third grade year is so very, very important. And we take tests at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the year so that we know the different skills in the early literacy network where students are doing well and where they're not, right? I mean, there's little things that I'm just going to throw out, right? In kindergarten, right, students should be able to list off 51 letters in a course of a minute, right? As they enter kindergarten, as they have exited pre-K, right, they should get 25 in a minute, right? You can think of them as flashcards, right? Can they do it that quickly? Can they see them and just rattle those off? Because if kids know their letters at a very, very early age, their chances of reading, literally there are studies that go all the way up to the 10th grade. And so we know that, and we are making sure that in the virtual space, we're hitting a letter a week in pre-K, right? So, but again, we'll be doing those assessments at the beginning of the year so that we can figure out where students are strong and where they need additional support. One other area about that is, right, not only will that happen in those small groups, but it will also happen in personalized learning, right? One of the programs we'll use is iReady, and that makes sure that as students take an iReady assessment, that then they are kind of programmed into areas where they can catch up and where they can do additional practice. So we're lining all that up so that in the virtual space, we've got a regular lesson, we've got some small group work, we've got some individualized, personalized work, and again, trying to weave that all for the best opportunity for our kids so that learning loss is minimized or even negligent and there's none of it.
Excellent. Well, Chief Davis, we've now reached 6:45. We've answered the bulk of our questions tonight, which is good. It means that we're doing a fairly good job of making sure that we connect with our public. But if you find that you have a question later, you can email us at reopening@bcps.k12.md.us. You can submit a question on the medium that you're using. It'll get back to us, and we'll do our best to answer it. And if not, then we will see you in a week's time here in this space. But before we go, Chief Davis, do you got anything to say before we close the show?
Yeah, a few things, Andre. First, I mean, people may have heard this at the beginning, but if you came in a little bit later, I want people to know about our device distribution change, right? We were doing them at North Avenue. But we got just a lot more families have shown up in the last week or so, to the point that it's too hot to wait. And it's also the social distancing aspect is an issue. And so we're going to go back to having a device distribution at schools. We will give logistical information about that on Monday, August 17th, but I want people to know that that's where we're going to kind of transfer the situation and go back to how we did it in the spring. It was successful in the spring, so we'll go back to that situation. Again, right, so next week there will not be device distribution at North Avenue. I need for everyone to understand that, and we'll give more logistical information on Monday, August 17th. I think from a bigger picture, though, besides that announcement, I always want to thank families for staying with us and keeping us honest and keeping us humble and keeping us accountable, right? Sometimes the questions are tough, but I'd rather them be tough and we be honest and be honest about our answers and where we are in this process, right? We've got a lot of the direction that we're going, but we still have more work to do. And so I want to appreciate the parents that are asking questions and pushing us. I also want to just appreciate the parents that have stuck with us from the spring through the summer and now. Right, there was a question about homeschooling. I'm sure parents making other difficult decisions about what's best for their child. I completely understand that, but know that the group of educators in Baltimore City Public Schools, the teachers inside the school, the principals that are leading the schools, myself as a district office leader, other people in the district office that are doing a lot of planning with our schools, are going to do everything we can so that September 8th is a great day, and it is a great virtual learning day, right? And we'll get better and better at it, but we know that we've got to deliver for our families. And I want to thank the folks that have stuck with us and kept us honest throughout it all.
Well said, Chief Davis, well said. And again, we thank everyone for joining us this evening for our latest family virtual town hall. For more information about the reopening effort, visit www.baltimorecityschools.org/reopening. We've got a great new dashboard where you can see all the data that we've collected from our stakeholder engagement. You can see the proposed plan. You can also find out other ways to become well-informed about what we're doing. This is a long-term process. We've got a lot of blanks to fill in, but we're all going to do it together as one community. I am the Director of Communications for the Baltimore City Public Schools, Andre Riley, who just turned off his camera. With that said, it's been a great moment in Baltimore City Public Schools, and we'll see you in a week's time, 6 p.m. next Thursday, here on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You have a great evening.